On Christmas Eve in Manhattan, billionaire CEO Veronica Ashford arrived at a glowing restaurant with her deaf daughter, Mila, unaware that Caleb Foster, a quiet single father working maintenance nearby with his son, was about to step forward and change all their lives. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Let's begin. Christmas Eve turned Manhattan into a polished illusion. The Aurelia restaurant glowed with warm gold light, chandeliers reflecting off glass, and silverware like a promise meant only for those who could afford it. Caleb Foster stood in the service corridor behind the dining hall, the hum of power lines vibrating faintly through the walls. He adjusted the strap of his tool bag, already feeling the weight settle into his shoulder like it always did, familiar, grounding. Beside him, his 10-year-old son Jude waited patiently, hands tucked into the sleeves of his oversized hoodie. Jude watched everything. Blinking security cameras, catering staff rushing past, the slight delay between the lights and the sound system. He didn't fidget. He never did. Life had taught him that stillness was a kind of preparation. "Stay close," Caleb murmured. Jude nodded, then signed it back anyway. "I know." They had learned sign language together after Jude's mother died. Not because Jude was deaf, but because silence had saved them both. Words had been too sharp back then. Hands had been safer. A restaurant supervisor met them with a forced smile and impatience leaking through it. "VIP room's audio is glitching. CEO's dinner. Fix it fast." Caleb nodded and followed the wiring path, pushing through a narrow service door. The noise from the dining room dulled immediately. Too suddenly. The lights flickered once. Caleb stopped. Another flicker, longer this time. A faint electrical crackle traveled along the wall like static under skin. Jude touched his arm and signed one word. "Wrong." Before Caleb could answer, the door at the far end of the corridor opened quietly. A little girl stood there. She couldn't have been more than 8. Pale blue dress, blonde hair tied carefully back, a stuffed bear pressed tight against her chest. Small hearing aids curved behind her ears, catching the hallway light. Her eyes darted nervously, not focusing on faces, but on vibrations, movements, danger she could feel but not fully hear. Caleb knew that look. Overstimulated. Scared. Trying not to cry because crying would make things worse. He crouched slowly, making sure she could see his hands. He didn't speak. He signed gently. "Hi. Are you okay?" Her eyes widened. Relief flashed across her face like sunlight breaking through clouds. "You sign?" she asked, hands trembling. Jude stepped forward, grinning. "He's really good." The girl's mouth curved into a small, surprised smile. "It's loud," she signed. "It hurts." Caleb's chest tightened. Electrical interference. Sound systems could do that, especially if tampered with. "We can fix it," he signed. "Quiet place first." She hesitated, glancing back toward the dining room like she expected trouble for leaving. Then heels clicked sharply against marble. A woman appeared at the corridor entrance, tall, elegant, controlled. Veronica Ashford, CEO. Power radiated from her like heat. Her gaze locked on Caleb instantly. "What is happening?" she demanded. The vibration of her voice made the girl flinch. Caleb stood slowly, careful not to startle anyone. "Your daughter's hearing aids are reacting to interference. The system's unstable. She needs quiet. I can stop it." Veronica's eyes flicked over his uniform, his son, the tool bag. Suspicion hardened her expression. Another flicker. Louder murmurs from the dining room. Jude's hand brushed Caleb's wrist twice. A signal. Caleb followed Jude's gaze just in time to see a man in a tailored suit slip a USB drive into his pocket before disappearing into the crowd. Caleb's pulse spiked. This wasn't a malfunction. It was sabotage. And Veronica Ashford didn't know yet that her empire and her daughter were standing on a fault line. Caleb moved first, because hesitation was a luxury he'd never been able to afford. He guided Mila deeper into the service corridor, away from the dining room's hum. The further they went, the quieter it became. No clinking glasses, no layered conversations, no vibrating bass from hidden speakers. Her shoulders loosened inch by inch. "Better," she signed, breathing slower. Veronica followed, heels echoing sharply against concrete. Her phone buzzed nonstop in her hand, but for once she didn't answer it. She watched her daughter instead, really watched her, and the realization unsettled her more than the flickering lights ever could. Caleb stopped near an electrical access panel and knelt. "This won't take long," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. He opened his tool bag with practiced efficiency, but his eyes kept tracking the corridor reflections in the metal panel. Whoever planted the interference knew where to hit. Clean. Precise. Too precise. Jude hovered near the corner, pretending to tie his shoe while actually watching the hallway. He signed without looking at Caleb. "Suit guy. Same one. Near the bar earlier." Caleb nodded once. Behind them, Veronica crossed her arms. "Security says this is a localized failure," she said. "Contained." Caleb didn't look up. "That's what you say when you don't want investors to panic." Her jaw tightened. "I don't appreciate." Another surge hit. Mila winced, hands flying to her ears. The feedback whined briefly, sharp and painful. Caleb reacted instantly, cutting the auxiliary loop and grounding the line. The noise died. Silence. Mila exhaled, shoulders dropping. She looked at Caleb like he'd just pulled her out of deep water. "Thank you," she signed. Veronica watched, frozen. Not because of the fix, but because she understood none of the words her daughter was saying. She saw connection happening in front of her and realized she'd been standing outside it for years. Caleb stood. "This system was bridged intentionally," he said quietly. "Someone ran a parallel feed through a hidden port. That doesn't happen by accident." Veronica stiffened. "Who would do that?" Caleb met her eyes for the first time. "Someone who benefits if you look unstable." Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered. "Yes." A pause. Her face drained of color. "What do you mean the backup drive is missing?" Caleb felt the air shift. Pieces slid together in his mind. USB drive, suit, timed interference, investor dinner. A coup dressed as incompetence. "I'll handle it," Veronica said, then ended the call. She turned to Caleb, control cracking just enough to show the human underneath. "My board has a removal clause. If investors lose confidence tonight." "You're out," Caleb finished. She nodded once. Jude stepped forward, eyes sharp. The man with the USB wasn't staff, he signed. He avoided cameras. Used blind spots. Caleb translated. Veronica stared at Jude, then at Caleb. "How did he know that?" "He grew up watching what adults don't," Caleb said simply. For a moment, Veronica said nothing. Then she straightened. "I want the truth," she said. "Not a cover story. Not optics." Caleb hesitated. Men like him weren't invited into decisions like this. But Mila tugged gently at Veronica's sleeve and signed something small and powerful. "Listen to him." Veronica swallowed. "Help me," she said to Caleb. "Not as a CEO, as a mother." And in that narrow service corridor, beneath exposed wiring and humming conduits, Caleb Foster stepped fully onto a line that could destroy his quiet life, or finally give it meaning. The service corridor felt smaller once the decision was made. Caleb sensed it the way he sensed a building under stress, pressure shifting, weight redistributing. Once you chose to intervene, you were part of the structure. If it collapsed, you collapsed with it. Veronica led them into a secured staff office just off the corridor. The room smelled faintly of coffee and ozone. She locked the door herself. "I need proof," she said, pacing now, the polish finally cracking. "Not suspicions. Not intuition. If I accuse a board strategist, I don't get a second chance." Caleb set his tool bag down and opened it, not to pull tools, but to pull out his phone. The screen was old, the case cracked. "I asked for camera access earlier," he said. "Your supervisor brushed me off." But he didn't cut the feed. He connected a cable to the wall terminal and mirrored the footage. Jude climbed onto a chair, eyes intent. He'd been watching people his whole life. Men who drank too much, landlords who lied, bosses who smiled while cutting hours. Patterns didn't scare him. They spoke to him. They rewound the footage. There, near the bar. The suited man again. Not a waiter. Not security. He never faced the cameras directly. Always angled away. Always stepping through blind zones. Veronica leaned closer. "That's Harlan Drake's personal consultant," she said quietly. "He doesn't attend dinners." Caleb zoomed in on the man's hands. The USB exchange was brief. Clean. Hidden by a champagne tray. Then came the moment that mattered most. Jude tapped the screen and signed fast. Pause. There. Caleb froze the frame. A reflection in the mirrored column. Isabel Crow, Veronica's PR chief. Watching. Smiling. Veronica's breath caught. No. Caleb didn't soften it. They coordinated timing. The interference spikes line up with the investor speeches, designed to make you look distracted, unstable, unfit, Veronica whispered. The room went quiet except for Mila's soft breathing. She sat cross-legged on the floor, bare in her lap, watching hands instead of faces. When she sensed the tension rise, she signed to Caleb. Are they bad? Caleb knelt. They made bad choices. She considered that, then signed back. People can choose again. Veronica turned away, eyes wet but furious now. They used my daughter, she said. They knew about the hearing aids. They knew it would overwhelm her. Caleb felt something hard settle in his chest. This wasn't just corporate betrayal. It was cruelty with a spreadsheet. What do we do? Veronica asked. Caleb exhaled slowly. We don't expose everything yet. We stabilize first. Stabilize? She echoed. You finish the dinner, he said. You show calm. I quietly isolate the feed and log the interference trail. Jude tracks movement. Then, when the investor asks why there was a disruption, you tell the truth. She stared at him. That could tank the deal. It could also save it, Caleb said. Some people invest in control. Others invest in character. There was a knock at the door. Security. Veronica squared her shoulders, power sliding back into place, but different now. Less armor. More spine. She opened the door. I'm aware of the situation, she said coolly. I've authorized Caleb Foster to assist fully. Any interference with him will be documented. The guard hesitated, then nodded. As they stepped back into the corridor, the hum of the restaurant felt different, less threatening, more like a test. Mila slipped her small hand into Jude's without thinking. Caleb noticed. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. And for the first time in years, Caleb wasn't afraid of that. The dining room had regained its glow by the time they returned, but the warmth felt thinner now, like a stage light after the curtain had already started to fall. Veronica walked back to her table with measured calm, Mila at her side. She didn't sit immediately. She rested one hand on her daughter's shoulder, grounding herself before facing the room. Caleb lingered near the service wall, half-shadowed, tool bag closed but ready. Jude stood beside him, posture loose, eyes sharp. Harlan Drake noticed the change at once. He was a tall man with silver hair and a voice trained to sound reasonable even when it wasn't. His smile tightened as Veronica approached, his gaze flicking briefly to Caleb's uniform before returning to her face. Minor hiccup? Harlan asked lightly. These old buildings. It wasn't the building, Veronica said. The table went quiet. Investors leaned in, curiosity sharpening. Leonard Grayson, the oldest among them, studied Veronica over the rim of his glass. He didn't speak. He never rushed truth. Veronica continued, steady. We experienced a targeted systems interference. It affected the audio feed and my daughter's hearing aids. A ripple of discomfort moved through the table. Harlan frowned. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious fact, Veronica replied. She gestured slightly toward the wall. My maintenance contractor isolated the source. We have footage. Caleb felt every eye turn toward him. Old instincts flared. Don't be visible, but he stayed still. Jude's hand brushed his wrist once. You're okay. Isabel Crow laughed softly, shaking her head. Veronica, with respect, this isn't the time for internal drama. Investors don't want. They want honesty, Leonard Grayson said at last. The room stilled completely. Leonard stood, slow and deliberate. I've watched companies collapse because leaders hid weakness instead of confronting it. Tonight, I see a woman choosing truth over image. Harlan's smile finally cracked. You're overreacting. Caleb stepped forward then, not loud, not aggressive, just present. He held up his phone, the paused footage visible. Sir, Caleb said calmly, your consultant accessed a restricted port at 6:42 p.m. The USB transfer happened 3 minutes later. The interference began on schedule. Harlan's face drained of color. Isabel's mouth opened, then closed. Security moved, this time at Veronica's signal. I am invoking an emergency board review, Veronica said. Effective immediately, Harlan Drake is suspended pending investigation. Isabel Crow, your access is revoked. Isabel stared, stunned. You can't do this tonight. I already did, Veronica replied. The room erupted in whispers. Phones buzzed. Careers quietly ended. Leonard Grayson approached Veronica as security escorted Harlan away. Your valuation may dip, he said, but your foundation just strengthened. He glanced at Mila, who was calmly signing something to Jude, laughing silently. I'm staying, Leonard added. And so is my investment. Relief hit Veronica like a delayed wave. She exhaled shakily. Across the room, Caleb felt something loosen inside him too. Not triumph, but relief. The kind that came when truth finally outweighed fear. Later, as the dinner wound down and Manhattan glittered beyond the windows, Veronica approached Caleb. Stay, she said simply. Tomorrow, too. Caleb nodded. Because some nights didn't end when the lights dimmed. Some nights rewrote what came next. The fallout didn't arrive with sirens or headlines. It came quietly. Emails sent before dawn, access revoked with a single keystroke, names removed from calendars like they had never mattered at all. By morning, Harlan Drake was suspended. By noon, Isabel Crow's resignation circulated through internal channels, wrapped in careful language that fooled no one. By nightfall, the truth had settled into the building like dust after demolition. Caleb Foster returned to work 2 days later expecting life to shrink back to its old shape. It didn't. Veronica Ashford called him into her office. Not the glass-walled executive suite, but a smaller room with a low table and soft light. Mila sat on the floor with Jude, their heads bent together, hands flying in quiet conversation. Caleb stopped in the doorway. They looked like they belonged together. Veronica noticed his hesitation. You're not intruding, she said gently. You helped build this moment. She slid a folder across the table. A long-term facilities coordination contract. Fair pay. Stability. Respect written into every line. Caleb didn't open it right away. You don't owe me, he said. Veronica shook her head. I do, but not like you think. You showed me where I was failing without humiliating me. You protected my daughter when I didn't even realize she needed protection. Mila looked up and signed to her mother. Slowly, carefully. You're learning. Veronica smiled, eyes bright. Every day. She had already enrolled in intensive sign language classes. Already rearranged her schedule so meetings never overlapped Mila's therapy. Already told the board that her daughter would no longer be hidden for convenience. Caleb watched it all, something warm and unfamiliar settling in his chest. 2 weeks later, Veronica invited them to her home. No staff, no press, just dinner, mismatched plates, and a tree still glowing softly in the corner. Jude helped Mila hang an ornament shaped like a small star. Caleb stood back, unsure of his place, until Veronica joined him. I spent years believing strength meant distance, she said quietly. Tonight, I understand it means presence. She lifted her hands, slightly awkward but determined. They all formed a circle, for people bound by a night that could have gone very differently. Together, slowly, they signed one word. Family. Caleb didn't know what the future held. He only knew this. The most powerful systems weren't built with money or fear. They were built when someone chose to stay, to listen, and to learn a new language, one honest gesture at a time. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more stories that stay with you.